Welcome to Morning Joe, a live look at the White House this morning, the morning after the State of the Union address that we're talking about. We're still here at the NBC News Washington Bureau. Pat Buchanan is here with us as well in Washington. And joining the table, Republican Congressman from Georgia, Representative Jack Kingston, and Democratic Congresswoman from Florida, Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz. And Willie, of course, standing by in New York. Willie,
you know, Mika, yesterday, Pat Buchanan set this up as Willie.
Yes, he did. And I know you were
as Willie said, the second coming of the Gettysburg Address.
Well, of course he was.
So Pat Buchanan this morning could sniff and go, I wasn't that impressed.
It was a very good speech.
What you say was a very good speech.
It was a very good speech.
You were bored.
And also, stop it.
You were bored.
Stop.
Tell the truth. Look in the camera and tell the truth. Were you surprised by how flat that speech was last night? You were sitting in there. Were you surprised, as were Democrats and Republicans alike?
Well, a couple of things. I don't think it's about me and whether or not I'm bored.
I'm asking your opinion.
My opinion is that it was a tough crowd, and he usually, I think, gets a lot of energy, garners a lot of energy and sort of stamina in a speech from the crowd, and it's just a very tough crowd.
Pat Buchanan, it was a tough crowd. You know, Pat, you and I give a lot of speeches, as do Congressman, Congresswoman, and there are a lot of times you do lines and you just know this one's going to score.
Right.
You get 3 minutes into a speech and your best joke goes flat, and
you
you're
start
like,
sweating.
God, it's over. Well, last night's crowd, because of the configuration, it was one of the toughest crowds, I think, that the president had to deal with.
For a State of the Union, it was very tepid. You know, polite applause almost. There wasn't what they used to have, the energy and fire. And Obama really gets strength and energy from that.
Like Tucson.
And he wasn't getting it. Like Tucson, he was getting it.
Incredible.
But he wasn't getting it last night. But I just thought the president was flat. I was expecting a far more inspirational speech.
You were inspired.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, I was.
You like, when he said science.
My ears aren't as cynical as yours.
I'm not cynical. You know, the first 5 minutes or so, I was really inspired, and I said, he's going to really find his political sweet spot tonight. And then he started going through the laundry list, and it sounded like every other speech.
But the way I heard it was that the dynamic in the chamber was completely transformed by the fact that Democrats and Republicans were sitting together.
Wasn't that remarkable?
It really was. I mean, I think we listened in a more unified way. So as a result, I don't think that it was the speech was boring or tepid. I think it's that we were so much more actively listening, and people were being considerate. I know I sat between two conservative Republicans, and we were all going out of our way, I think, to be considerate of not hopping up and down at every other word.
And by the way, I want to make sure that everybody listening and watching gets this. We're not criticizing the president. It was a completely different situation. Jack, how many of these have you sat through?
I guess this is my 19th one.
So you're an expert on these things. It was unlike any other State of the Union.
It was. I've actually sat in the Democrat section before, and there's no question about it. The partisanship of jumping up and down the right or the left aisle, and but I think all of us were on better behavior and maybe on the edge of our seat. You couldn't turn to the person next to him and whisper something cynical and sinister and snide. But and I was sitting next to Sanford Bishop, very enthusiastic about the president, jumped up a lot of times himself and started the applause. But Joe, I didn't think he had any risk. I think a State of the Union should have some risk in it. Talk about something, you know, to say I really want tax simplification, I want immigration reform, but to offer nothing. Come on, you've been in town a while now. Let's have some specifics.
Was it risk-free? What was the great idea in the speech? What was the big risk?
Well, for a Democratic president like him, who came in on a wave, particularly that has liberal support, to propose a 5-year domestic spending freeze, to propose a reduction in the corporate tax rate.
Unified there.
There's
3 people clapped. That was it. Republicans wanted more. Democrats wanted less. So that was a risky proposal for a progressive. Also, I was struck, sitting here for 2 years, saying that he sounded anti-business for the first 2 years. To me, he sounded like a guy straight out of the NFIB.
He proposed reviewing all government regulations and tossing out ones
that help us. He kept talking about small business driving the economy.
And make us anti-competitive, absolutely.
And malpractice, which was good.
What was that about? He was even talking about
trade agreement,
that might have been more in the speech for Republicans than there were for Democrats.
The repeal of the 1099s. There were a lot of pro-business things. But I want to get back to what Jeb Henslin said a little while ago. You can agree with this president very readily, but his words and his actions always have a big gulf in between them, and so will there be action?
Hot calling the kettle black there a little bit, though.
I really do think we need to underline this fact that not only stylistically but also rhetorically, this is such a big difference from his last State of the Union address, because there were so many pro-business proposals that were out there that you can't say, as Robert Gibbs suggested a few days ago, that this president is the same today as he was over the past 2 years. No. Pat, he's not.
Look, he's moved clearly away from Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid. A lot of what he said, moderate conservatives could applaud what he was saying. He didn't come off to me as a liberal president of the United States at all, but I tell you what was missing, Joe. If you believe we're really in a fiscal and financial crisis, did you get that sense from the president? It was sort of positive and uplifting.
No, that's not true.
Good.
He wasn't just positive and uplifting. What I thought was actually what I really liked, and I'm probably going to be the only one at the table who liked this, but he was self-aware about where we are in the world and what we need to do to catch up. And instead of being completely all about, American exceptionalism, it was like, let's take a look at our kids and our students and where we lag behind and where we need to move forward. And we will do that. I will inspire you, but I will do it in a realistic way, and I did like that.
He did speak like I don't think a national politician has spoken in a while, where he said, yeah, we have challenges, but we're going to win.
Real ones.
Remember, he called for this generation's Sputnik moment. Right. And in light of President Hu's visit in the last week, talking about how far China has come, making sure that we out-compete and out-educate our American children, and also making sure that we can stay on top, recognizing how far we've come and that we've turned the corner on the economy.
Jack Kingston, you look at the headline of the Washington Post, "Win the Future." Thematically, this was Ronald Reagan. He may not have delivered it as well as Reagan would have, but a more optimistic message.
It was, but I think he kept it in the middle of the road. He was safe about it. And by the way, I believe Newt Gingrich has a book called "Winning the Future," so it was certainly wasn't an original line. He did wrap the speech with a lot of.
Chris Christie also talked about in his State of the State address, we do big things.
Yes.
Somebody lifted that line straight from Chris Christie.
But he talked about togetherness, and there was a very patriotic tone to it. There's no question about it. But on that Sputnik moment, which I think was supposed to be pivotal in the speech and help us realize we're at a pivotal moment, he did not build the case. He did not say, look, here's where the debt is. Here's where we're falling behind India and China on innovation and jobs. Here's what we have to do. Now, the one thing I want to say, I did agree with him on the education, and I know you two, that was music to your ears, talking about race to the top and so forth. However,
he was channeling Jeffrey Canada, and that's a pretty great guy to channel.
Yes, and I know, you've had specials where you go to the schools themselves, and so we're all together on education. However, I was looking at some statistics. We spend something like the second highest rate per child of all the industrial countries. We spend a third more than Finland, who outscores us in math consistently.
You know what? And that's the one thing you will find progressive educators as well as conservatives that are reformers saying it's not about money, even though I don't want to cut.
But the president said it wasn't about money. The president said that we need to make sure that we put out science and math teachers and make sure that we're on the cutting edge of technology and make sure that our kids are graduating, that they're graduating, period, and that they're graduating ready to compete with the other students across the globe.
But the question is, why do we spend more per capita than any other country but Luxembourg? Are 1% of them, or whatever it is, proficient in science? Why are the schools failing? Why are the test scores going down?
Well, Pat, I think the president has agreed with conservatives over the past 2 years that we have a horrible, inefficient system that's broken that actually leaves the most disadvantaged children behind.
But he said it's a Sputnik moment. Did that speech sound like the Russians had put that thing in space?
You didn't feel the drama. There should have been a little bit more of a drum roll. He should have said, this is a Sputnik moment, and this is what we've got to do. And then that's where the risk should have come in. The vision. There was no vision. It was all safe things.
You are mining the speech for things that you didn't like. You have to comb through it with a fine-tooth comb.
I said that to Democrats and paused happily at the right times. In fact, Debbie, I'll tell you what I did like when he said to children, if you want to make a difference, become a teacher. Now, I thought that was worth a 5-minute applause. I thought that was a great line.
I thought it was very. Mika, let's follow up on this, because the president did talk about this Sputnik moment, and I will, I guess, sound like my Republican brethren here, when you bring up Sputnik, and you know I've talked about it for years, and I've talked about transforming the economy through green energy.
You both have.
But when you talk about the Sputnik moment, you expect a payoff. I heard Sputnik moment, and for the life of me, I can't tell you what he called Americans to do, which reminds me of George W. Bush after 2001 saying, go back into the malls. We once again have a president that takes the stage and doesn't ask Americans to sacrifice. Your Social Security retirement age, if you're in the 40s, it's not going to be 65. It's going to be 67. Medicare is not going to grow at 20%. It's going to grow at 4%. The Pentagon, we're going to cut. Republicans, we're going to cut Pentagon. There were no tough choices. He said, we're going to tax millionaires.
I spoke to some leading Democrats about the speech right after, and they came that close to saying that I thought it was a good speech, but it lacked, and literally would cut themselves off. And I said, specifics? What do you? And there were a couple of them that said that.
But they never really do.
I tried to talk to Mitch McConnell as well. But
Mitch was actually very rude to Mika Brzezinski. Mitch McConnell.
I don't get it.
It was really something.
I thought it was sort of bipartisan.
Can you believe that? So this warm and fuzzy stuff ended with Mitch and Mika.
And she's officially my guest. I am offended also.
I know. Well, you write a letter.
By the way, I loved my seat. It was a wonderful vantage point to watch.
So Debbie, let me give you the final word. What did you find most inspiring about last night?
What I thought was most inspiring was when he called for making sure that by 2025 we can have 80% of America that have access to high-speed rail, 98% of Americans have access to high-speed internet, making sure that we focus on science and technology and investments in energy, and make sure that, I mean, the Sputnik moment was the portion of the speech where he talked about innovation in energy and incentivizing through tax breaks the opportunity for entrepreneurs to make energy innovation our next Sputnik.
Now, have you heard the great news this morning? Your dear friend Gabby upgraded. Good.
Yep, she's going to the rehabilitation hospital today.
That's fantastic.
And I'm going to see her in about a week and a half.
Our prayers are with her. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
And Jack, thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
And Mika, thank you for the ticket, but I'll tell you, McConnell.
We'll work on that. We'll get that straight.
I tried to, well, we'll talk.
We'll get it done.
I'll tell you what happened. Much more still ahead, including